We don't have a goal of becoming technological. We have the need. We have the specific tasks that we need to perform by protecting our personnel on the front line. This is not about a startup that gets some seed funding and then spins off and then makes a unicorn. This is human lives at stake. I really want the defense industry in Ukraine and abroad to be so saturated with the Ukrainian expertise, no matter where it comes from.
Welcome everyone to a new episode of Defense Forward podcast. We are here today with Jonathan Winch from Cylinder Defense, Denmark. I'm Dan Kucherenko from Serhiy Prytula Charity Foundation in Kyiv, and our guest is Mykyta Puz, Military Technology Scouting and Partnership Officer at 12th Special Forces Brigade of the National Guard of Ukraine, Azov.
Hi everybody. Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure being here in your podcast.
From your LinkedIn profile, I have fetched some information about your previous experience. You were a French translator by education. You work for Cloudmate and Stellantis by career, and you are a competitive driver by hobby. Is it right?
Yeah, that's correct. It feels like it's been in a previous life, I would say. But yeah, that sums up my civilian career pretty well.
And a few words about Azov. Azov was the first unit in Ukraine to deliver blood by drones into frontline trenches and conducted a battlefield transfusions, a procedure later replicated by the US Army. And now Azov moves from 30 to 35 tons of supplies to the front line only by UGV. So it looks like Azov is one of the most technological units in armed forces of Ukraine. Is it right? Do you feel it?
We don't have a goal of becoming technological. We have the need. We have the specific tasks that we need to perform by protecting our personnel on the front line, with this being the highest priority. And if technology helps us with that, we are very, very open and welcome to adopting it. I would say that that's right formulation. Just being technological is a means to an end. It's kind of a problems that we need to solve. Speaking of the discussions we had at the Invest in Bravery Summit, I think it's very important to understand that right now, the defense sector in general, the defense industry in general, which draws a lot of attention, draws a lot of capital, let's be honest, a lot of money.
You're talking about the Ukrainian defense
No, I'm
industry.
talking even overall. Worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
In general. Taking a step back, while being deployed to the war zone, I've noticed one thing. No, two things actually. First, the war is expensive. The war is really expensive. And a second, the more resources, like financial/material, because it's not about financial resources per se, it's about the material that you can get for that resource. The more material you have, the better my brothers in arms are protected. You know, the more efficient they can be on a battlefield, the better they can keep the defense line. They get less wounded. They get more operational, and there is a very, very direct correlation in that, I must say. And the better the equipment itself is that you can get, the better the material is. Again, it also contributes. The more and the better. And coming back to the point with the defense spending, you know, with defense capital, there is a lot of money right now flowing into the innovation or production of the different materials, defensive or offensive, whatsoever, for which could be useful for the battlefield. And I really want those funds to be as focused as possible on the stuff which really matters. As I said yesterday in a panel discussion, like addressing the investors, you are gonna be putting money into companies that produce stuff on which my life and the life of my brothers in arms depends on. Mm-hmm. And I really want it to be good.
Yeah.
And I think that's the first very important statement. And the second one is that the only way, given the experience that Azov has, that or many other brigades deployed at the front line and other military units deployed at the front line have, is the absolute unique understanding of what actually matters and what doesn't, what works and what doesn't. And it's very important to link that purely capital approach to the investments, which is, you know, you're thinking revenues, you're thinking ARR and so on, but to link it with the product itself. And I've seen a huge gap in that regard. Like everybody thinking revenues, not thinking about the product, which I think is a kind of a fallacy, because you got to think a good product, and a good product will bring the revenue.
Yes.
And the only way of building a good product is understanding what the end user is going to need. It is completely different from the perception of the Western military procurement of the defense technology, because this is where like people like analytics and commanders, they take decisions thinking about the future, thinking about like big stuff that they need on a centralized fashion with a delivery window of like 5-6 years. That's not the case in Ukraine, and that's not a case for any modern conflict. You can see that in Iran right now happening, the very same story actually. So yeah, that's probably the main message.
Do you see this gap in Ukrainian company as well, in Ukrainian investors and companies that produce military technology?
It is much better than for the Western investors, I must say, based on my observations. But it's still there. It is still there. It is still a certain chasing for hype in a way. It is also sometimes the things of people who lack the context, despite being based in Ukraine, and, you know, creating an image of something they want to do in their mind, but without the reality check of it. I met a lot of companies, Ukraine and foreign companies in the defense industry, who, and I truly believe that, operate on really good intentions. Like they say, we want to help Ukraine, we want to make you guys stronger, and this is amazing. When I hear this, it means that their motivation is more than just cash. But in the same time, they could get, sometimes what I observe, they could get too illusioned by the idea of how they want to help us, which is not necessarily the way that we need to be helped with.
Yeah.
You know?
So knowing the help you need is the crucial factor.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Because you can also say that the pace of change in the battle zone is fast and to some degree accelerating over time. How fresh does their knowledge need to be? I mean, it depends on the technology, of course, and the application, but is it enough to have done your research 3 months ago? Or, you know, do you see that as an issue?
I do see that as an issue, really. And 3 months, well, it all depends on the actual product, but let me put it in perspective. Like most of the defense technology that I see deployed to the battlefield, like new stuff that is being deployed to the battlefield right now, is not something terribly unique. It's not something groundbreaking. I think the latest groundbreaking thing that I've seen was the fibre-optic drones back in 24. But right now, within the last year, there is no extreme breakthrough. It is evolution, but it is conscious evolution, I would say. This is about having a drone in a specific configuration and understanding that it has a gap that needs to be filled. There is some gap in capabilities, and then upgrading it, and then pushing a new revision rather than a new generation over to the operators. And for this, you need to be keeping a hand on the pulse, basically in real time.
Yeah, and I guess some of the innovation was more about how this technology, how products are used. So it's not about the product itself, but the use scenarios, like how they're used in assaults differently, whether you use combined forces.
Absolutely. The key question that I ask, like I often get reached out by young startups, like teams of students or some guys who don't have any financing whatsoever.
From hackathons or something.
From hackathons, but also through some like sort of wide network. They say, hey, they're nice guys, go and talk with them, please, if you have time. And I usually try to carve out some time because it is still important to give them relevance. And usually the first question that I ask them is, what is the operational scenario?
Yeah.
What is the concept of operation for your things? Like we built, they say, a rocket launcher turret. And I'm like, okay, so where it's going to be placed? How it's going to be operated, what it's going to be shooting down, if it's a rocket or whatever. Often they have a gap in that. They're like, well, we place it somewhere and it shoot down drones. No, it's not working like that. So you need to understand the ecosystem. You need to understand the higher context, wider context. And then you need to understand like which part of the context, which area, which gap that equipment, whatever that solution would be covering.
This is one of the things we wanted to do with this podcast as well, was to bring some of those realities, and I know it's sometimes a bit more detailed than would be expected in such a thing, but really to try and help close that gap, to say, well, the battle zone is like this now. What if we can call it doctrine? It's sort of broken down a little bit, but we call it the doctrine is like this now, right? So where are the needs? Where do the products fit in? Where does your product fit in?
Absolutely. I started getting defense tech like in a more systemic fashion last last year when I was invited to one of the hackathons by EDTH. I went there. I was the single military person there. I think it was Italy. And that the teams who were participating in them are really cool and really smart guys. I realized that I couldn't make 2 steps without somebody catching me and saying, and how does it work? Explain it to us. Can we have a question, please? Just 5 minutes of your time. And since I'm a nice person, I respond positively to all this, up to the point where I cannot make a bathroom breaks for 2 hours because I cannot simply physically reach the restroom because I'm being intercepted by such guys on the way. And then I understood that they're asking basically the same questions in terms of all they know about Ukraine, all they know about the battle zone is something they see on the internet. And it by far doesn't paint the actual picture. So what I did, I almost didn't sleep that night. I built a presentation covering stuff which is absolutely 100% obvious to anybody who at least, let's say, has been to Kramatorsk once. Give or take, but is absolutely something like extremely insightful for the people who want to get in defense, who want to understand the Ukrainian reality. And I built this presentation, and it turned out to be an absolute success, although I spent like 2 hours half sleeping making it, because that is the kind of at least high-level insight that we got to start with, like how the front line works. What is the kill zone? What is the gray zone? How does it operate? What kind of troops operate in that area with which model? This is not a secret, this is generally like public information, obvious information. It's not uncovering any specific tactics whatsoever, but it gives the right understanding of the context that, say, if your system needs to be deployed to the front line of troops and requires 4 kilowatts of energy and has a range of 5 kilometers, then it's absolutely useless, as good as its characteristics within its operational zone would be, for example, stuff like this.
Given that, do you believe that any company inside military tech market could succeed without recruiting soldiers from the real battlefield to get consulting?
Recruiting soldiers is a big problem right now.
I don't mean hire, but to...
Oh, cooperation and partnership. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think they can succeed without doing that, answering your question.
Because it looks like everything that we have on the internet or media is outdated at the moment they place to, because even this podcast we're recording right now will be published in a month or so. So the topic we're discussing right now could be outdated in a month, right?
Absolutely, but it's not even about that. It's rather about this quick feedback loop that would be missing if a company, if a manufacturer wouldn't be in direct contact with the people who have the battlefield experience, be it veterans, be it active service members that can dedicate their time for this kind of like consulting and advising. 100%, it must be happening in order to build actual products and not an image of something which looks good on paper.
Are you overrun by requests? Because you're a gateway for Azov Brigade, right? And I imagine, it's an absolutely a famous brigade. So one of the first on the list when you think, okay, who would we really like to have give us advice, test our products? What's the workload there?
First of all, thanks for the appreciation. I think we earned that reputation the hard way. We put a lot of effort into that, specifically by our performance on the battlefield, by how Azov operates in critical situations. Take Mariupol Steel Plant, take the Serebranka forest as well. We earned that reputation and expertise not by chance, but by systemic work. And yes, it has been becoming a problem right now in terms of the workload, in terms of the throughput capacity that I can have for addressing all of those requests right now. It is coming right now to a point where I need to consciously filter something and saying, thanks guys, it could be interesting, but we don't have the capacity to work on this right now. And we're also trying to connect them as much as possible, like the companies addressing us, also not to go via me, but to go via our partners, via the guys who help us with processing all that workload, so our active personnel could focus on what they're supposed to be doing, to focus on actually winning the war, on being in a battle, on defending the front line, but still having that contribution made as much as possible to the defense industry in overall.
Yep. I guess you risk a proliferation of devices and training requirements and so on, the more that wider that door is open.
If I can be blunt here, more than 90% of what I'm offered to review, to take a look at, and this is not just my opinion. I obviously, every time I see something, I always show it, even if I doubt myself, I don't have enough experience to judge, and I show it to the potential operators in our brigade, like a man systems representative or EW or whatever the system is. But 90% turns out, let's say, raw.
To be too far from reality.
Yeah, basically, yes. Yes, not necessarily far from reality, but not something that we could just take and start using right away, right? There's been several cases, mostly actually with software and with some specific components that we said, oh yeah, this is awesome.
Can you tell us?
We want it.
Maybe without names?
An example would be high-capacity batteries. So this is something that we heard of that provides more energy capacity per kilo compared to the standard off-the-shelf mass-market stuff. And we need those. We need this additional capacity for our drones to fly further, for our UGVs to go further, and for our equipment to work for a longer time and stuff. And we tested those batteries, and they surprisingly did perform as advertised, which is already a huge win, I must say. They had some issues with the construction in terms of how they were built, in terms of corresponding to the battlefield needs. So we provided some feedback to the manufacturer. They made some changes. And here we are. Now they're being quite massively used in the equipment of our UAV crews, basically. That's one example.
Does it was Western company or Ukrainian?
Yeah, a Western company. Yeah. And I'm also in contact with several more companies that have even better capacity, even higher energy density. Some, I know there are development in some advanced chemistry, which is not lithium at all. There is like the batteries that don't use anode, some new technology constantly evolving. Yeah, it's great, actually. It's very interesting to see. But again, it's very expensive right now. But still, like, if this gives us a certain operational advantage.
Yep. The cost can easily disappear in what it was able to affect.
Exactly.
As you mentioned previously, war is always expensive.
War is extremely expensive. I mean, very much. You're well aware of the multi-layer procurement strategy that we have in Ukraine for the military unit, from the level of the international aid up to the level of a platoon that could fundraise for their direct needs. And still, when you calculate all that money, is still insufficient. You still see, okay, if we were to have more materials, we could perform even better. Yeah. We could do even better stuff.
I could say it from our side, because we in Serhiy Prytula Charity Foundation raised 2.5 billion hryvnias last year. And that's so far from covering all needs, all requests that we have from soldiers. It's like 12% maybe of what we requested. So the need is really huge, and we will never cover it. And that is why it's so important to choose precisely what you will use, what you will buy, and how it will be distributed among brigades, because some of them are efficient and some are less. So we also have this analytical department who analyzes the results of units that intercepting drones, for example. And if we see that this unit performs better, we will give them more equipment. And if we see that other is weaker, probably we will send him for training or propose him to use other type of equipment, but we will not spend very expensive planes or drone interceptors to this unit. We will not give them.
That's a smart strategy, yeah.
Yeah, that's obvious strategy, because we are lack of everything currently. Can I ask you about revolution? Yeah, because you mentioned that in terms of technology, you mentioned that last was optic fiber that changed the battlefield dramatically. And how about UGV? Do you feel like UGV is changing it in the same way? If I recall it correct, Azov transfers from 20 to 25 tons of equipment every month using only UGV.
30 plus, and it's only one battalion, and we have UGVs deployed in all the infantry battalions and other units as well. So the
only one battalion of Azov Corps.
Of Azov Brigade.
Of Azov Brigade.
The unmanned systems battalion, their stats has been, last time I checked, more than 30 tons of equipment per month.
Do you think that is a breakthrough?
Look, UGV by itself is not a revolution as it is. I mean, putting the fiber optic that the internet provider used to give you high-speed internet on a drone so it can fly being tethered, this sounded like mind-blowing, really. With the UGVs, if we strip it down to the basics, it's a radio-controlled car.
It just
a wheelbarrow.
It just
Exactly.
box and the wheels.
Exactly, with some radio link and then some camera and stuff.
Starlink mostly.
Yes, yes, exactly. And it's not a revolution per se. It's rather a question
Fair.
whether we found the concept of operations for those. Yes, we did. Whether we can fit the configuration, what we need to the ConOps. And again, it's very important, again, to state that first, we have the tasks that we need to perform. First, we have the concept of operations that we need to be in. Then we need the technology to address it. Because for so many times, I've been seeing great technology with no practical application.
Solution in search of a problem.
Exactly. My words exactly, yeah. Like with all the kind of like missile launchers or whatever, microwave, whatever. Yeah, and for so UGVs, I don't consider UGVs a revolution as it is. It's been like revolution is something that happens like this, really quickly, in my mind at least.
Like FPV, fiber optic.
For example, like the introduction of the FPVs on a battlefield. Yeah, it's something that appears almost out of nowhere. Almost. Well, there's been some backstory to it, obviously, but it was a game changer. I would say UGVs are right now an extremely important part of our operations. Is it like a revolution? I don't know. Maybe it's somewhere in between.
It's
a revolution
given
and evolution.
Political focus now, or a MOD focus in a big way. Do you approve of that focus and think that that's a very important place to aim for? Was it 50,000 UGVs, I think, over the next year, yeah?
It was the goal from Ukrainian MOD.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's smart. As simple as the fact that we do not have enough of the UGVs that we would have used if we had those. And yeah, we need the procurement to fill that gap as much as possible. So yeah, totally. I cannot comment on the number in terms of I don't have a good understanding whether that's enough or not. I'm pretty sure it's not enough for obvious reasons. We don't have all the money in the world to procure that. We don't have that. Actually, we don't have that number of really like sustainable and high-performing equipment in terms of a UGV right now. Still, that's where I think evolution is much more important than a revolution. This is where the UGV producers need to be much more practical, pragmatic, frugal, looking at what they're building, how it works, what breaks, what doesn't fit the operational scenarios, and to improve those to build something really robust. We're missing this robustness right now with on the UGV market.
Then probably the production scalability is also the problem, because we see in the companies like Rovertech or other that produce UGVs for years already, but they can't produce enough UGV to cover the needs. To make this jump from 300 UGVs to 3,000 UGVs is extremely difficult.
Production capacity for UGVs is what I heard is indeed a challenge, at least from the point of view that the UGVs, obviously, as you can see, if you've seen a UGV with your own eyes, anyone, and you've seen an FPV drone with your own eye, you can see that the amount of workload that you need to put into building a UGV is higher than assembling a drone. We do have, and this is like completely public information, we do have a big shortage of actual workforce in Ukraine. I'm not just talking about military personnel. I know it's a huge challenge right now for the manufacturers. We have the safety issues for their manufacturing locations. Yeah, it is hard, but I mean, we'll find a way. I'm
hardship has never stood in the way of Ukrainian progress.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, I think it probably ignites the fire.
No, totally. It's whenever somebody like comments and say, "Oh, guys, you're so great. You're doing such a great job. We've seen the videos you're publishing and stuff."
You can't imagine what we went through.
Exactly, but it's not even that. It's like it was a combination of like a very high determination, very high motivation, but also we didn't have other choice. Quoting Eminem, "Success is my only mother option, failure is not." And this is the case. It's our only option because it's a matter of surviving It's a matter of survival as a nation on a bigger scale. That's why I do what I do. That's why my brothers and arms do what they do. And it's also a matter of plainly physically surviving, like on the individual fashion as well. We need to adapt. We need to excel. That's it.
Yeah.
In terms of technology, if I get us back one more time, we mentioned previous one, but do you have the problem that your corps or the army in whole desperately need to solve, but don't have proper technology or equipment for this? What could be next revolution?
I'm not a visionary myself. I have this mindset when I like to work on the operational level. Tactical is way too small, and strategic is something, it's just, my mind doesn't work like this. We have, other much smarter people than myself who think on that terms, like what is the vision, what is like long-term strategy. Speaking of the gaps in the technology that I see right now that we really, really need, is communication systems that would conform with the requirements that we have on the battlefield right now. I'm talking both like the control and data links for any purpose you can imagine, from the drones to the actual like frontline positions being connected to the Internet of Things kind of thing for small devices. This is something that we lack in terms of a universal, scalable solution. So yeah, we do have Starlinks, but being attached that much on a needle of a single vendor is never good. That's why like we apply double, triple redundancy for critical links where, yeah, Starlink is the baseline way of connecting, but we have additional backups, exactly. But still, it's all being custom made, I would say, to a certain extent, with extremely smart engineers that we have on every level from the battalion and upwards. So comms, I would say, is something, the mesh systems. Unfortunately, there's been a little too much hype about mesh and not much of the results so far. I hope it's going to change in the near future, and the company that can build a robust, scalable, universal mesh system would succeed immensely.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the second thing is actually energy, I think, as well. This is where some revolution might come from. Already seen the examples, well, as I spoke previously, the cases with like advanced chemistry for the batteries, but also some hydrogen fuel cells, some methanol-based fuel cells. All this is really interesting. All this is right now more like in its infancy, but I believe that the robustness will come, again, if those energy sources stop existing in a vacuum, but rather will see how to fit the technology to the needs.
Yeah, like hydrogen-powered drones, for example. There's a technology, it doesn't have a place yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I had a discussion yesterday also about the hydrogen-powered drones. We were saying, well, yeah, this is cool. It can fly for much longer time, much further. And I said, yeah, but its payload, it needs to carry much more in itself to fly further with the gas tank and stuff. But I said, what I really like with the hydrogen technology, if it's a strike drone, you probably won't even need ammunition in it.
It will explode
because it will
immensely.
explode wonderfully.
That would work well in an oil refinery, just to mention a piece of infrastructure I could think of.
Oh, you just found a concept of operation for hydrogen-based drones, I guess. Yeah, you should talk with the first center or
we have
other guys.
We just did.
Awesome. They're great guys. I have deep respect for what they're doing, and they're making an amazing impact in terms of pushing us towards the victory. So, yeah.
Yeah, they are making life very hard for Russia right now.
Totally.
Well, we applaud that.
Talking about Russia and Russian war against Ukraine, where is Azov right now, and which, I don't know, sector or field you're controlling? Is it Pokrovsk?
It is that area, is what I can say. Yes, roughly in that area. So we have the whole, almost biggest part of the core stationed in that area.
What was it that built Azov's reputation?
I think it came from the sincerity in the motivation of Azov's fighters starting from 2014, because that's when it was like people who were so passionate. They didn't care for anything else. They were so passionate for protecting their country, for repelling the enemy, and that passion, that motivation, it drove the rest of it. You know, you've built up very quickly. They've built up the professionalism on top of that. They built the efficiency on top of it. All the, organizational and actually battlefield capacity on top of that motivation. And I think this is what got my respect and what made the main driver for me to join the unit when I decided to do so.
What can other brigades learn from Azov? And this is not to say that other brigades don't do a great job. There are fantastic brigades out there and everybody's working toward victory. But what can they learn from Azov, do you think?
I'm not that arrogant to think that, we could teach somebody, we would be in the position of teaching somebody even, I would say so. So I cannot really comment on this.
But there is sharing of knowledge between brigades.
No, absolutely. There is. And it's not that we are so great that we teach everybody how to fight. No, I mean, the assault forces are very good. The 7 Corps that we've been, and I think it was publicly announced, like in deep cooperation, and they're really smart guys over there, and we are learning from them as well.
Of course.
It is very interesting thing, which is defining to a certain extent to how Ukrainian defense forces operate, is that we have a big focus on horizontal ties, virtually any level. On a level of soldiers who speak between, among each other from different units, among their commanders, among the actual military commanders, which is more obvious, I guess. But still, there's so many horizontal ties and so much that we can learn from the others that we constantly try and do. And whenever we feel there is something that we can share, then we do that as well, obviously. So it's a two-way road, basically. I wouldn't say it's like us teaching somebody something. I mean, we're good, and I mean it with all my heart, but it's not that we don't have the arrogancy, we don't have the audacity of saying, yeah, we're going to teach you, because we understand that we lack so much. There's so much more that we can gain. There's so much more efficient that we can become, that it's more like we're much more open to learning rather than to teaching.
But it's not always about arrogancy, because we have many brigades on Ukrainian armed forces, and some of them become outdated because they don't have access for new technology. They didn't try it. They don't have experience of Azov. So probably they would love to learn from you as from any other brigade without dependency from the name. Because if you find some new technology like batteries, FPV, fibre-optic, and you wouldn't share it with other soldiers, other units, that means that you will stop the whole front line from becoming more efficient.
Yeah, but we are not a marketplace of technologies, and I mean, the discussions, as I said, the horizontal links, those work. And it's rather a matter of the mindset, It's not a matter of us gatekeeping the technology. We're not. It's rather a matter of if somebody reaches out to us and they're open to finding out something new, and they have the capability of using this new technology, and amazing. And also, they don't need Azov for that. Again, it's a matter of mindset of going out there, going in the world, seeing what's available. I see the more and more military units are doing this. I meet them in the different conferences, different meetings with the defense industry, that they're also learning, and they're doing this. And I think this just should put an example to it. I really want the defense industry in Ukraine and abroad to be so saturated with the Ukrainian expertise, no matter where it comes from, that eventually I would say, okay, there's an interesting conference over there. And I say, oh God, we got so many Ukrainians already. We cannot admit you. Yeah. I want this situation to happen, because this will build the wider resilience and wider capabilities along the front line, which we still would definitely benefit from indirectly. So I want this to happen, and I will be happy when this happens.
Ukrainian saturation. That's the strategy.
Totally. And especially abroad, I see so much of demand for tapping into Ukrainian expertise from our allied countries, it is complicated. As I already said, the first and foremost priority for us is fighting on the front lines.
Yes.
Is defending our troops, defending our territory, making sure our people safe. While doing this is the top priority. At the same time, when we need to think strategically, we need to be able to allocate a certain amount of resources, small one, that will not affect our direct battlefield capabilities in thinking a couple steps ahead.
Yep.
And this is building relations with the allied countries. This is helping them, sharing our experience, helping them shape the defense industry as well with our expertise. Because in the end, the more protected they are with that skills, with those learnings, with hopefully some sort of experience and with the equipment that they get, the safer we are going to be in the end.
The safer everyone is. That's
Exactly.
in Europe,
It's a matter of it's currently like a little bit of a bad phrase, but because it has some bad reputation. But it's a matter of collective security and safety.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
If we could imagine that Belarus was not a part of Russian proxy, Ukraine would be much safer, right? If we would have some problems from Hungary, for example, or from other countries, we will not have the safe region over there. It will shift our attention, so it will be a problem for Ukraine.
I really don't like commenting on geopolitics, and
Okay.
I'm not gonna do that.
Okay.
All I'm saying is that it's above my pay grade, let's say so. And again, we are a military unit. We need to fight, and we either have the direct increase of our capabilities one way or another, or we think of indirect positive impact to our capabilities.
Yeah.
Again, that comes with the communication with the allied countries, the military from allied countries, the defense industry of the allied countries, and this is part of the work that I and also many people actually in Azov are doing. I'm not the only one doing this. Obviously, there is a team that is specifically concentrated on this, let's say, operationally strategic foreign communication. I think this is pretty important.
I think also part of making this work for Western allies is to understand and to adopt the Ukrainian mindset. This is finding a balance, right? It's not like saying, well, we need to think like, this is the statement, of course, fight like a Ukrainian. We don't need to think like a Ukrainian, but we do need to adapt coming from the outside to the speed of things, to the openness that's required in order to develop partnerships, to dealing with issues of understanding the battle zone realities, all of these sorts of things. There are some significant changes, and you can only really get that sort of mindset by being here in Ukraine, at least some of the time. You can't get that from afar. You can't get that from reading things on the internet.
Absolutely. I'm not sure I agree with the change of mindset that you mentioned. In terms of, I don't believe people can easily change their mindset unless they are under a very significant threat or stress, at least, right? But other than that, yes, absolutely. Presence in Ukraine is extremely important for the awareness of the representative of like defense industry, of the capital, like such as yourself, for the military as well. Although there are some like legal complications that don't allow some of the country's military to even physically be present in Ukraine, which I think, being relieved could bring much more of additional benefit rather than risk for those servicemen. Yeah, it must happen again. I'm a huge proponent of transactional kind of a thing in a good way, in terms of there is always a two-way road, that you give something and you take something and somebody gives you something, and it's about the experience exchange. It's about all the robustness and versatility of cooperation models that are possible both on like in the private sector and also in the military, between military cooperation. And I think it needs to happen more and more, again, while keeping in mind that we have an immediate problem to solve here right now, but in the same time keeping in mind the importance of this longer term, not so long actually, mid-term strategy.
Yeah. So is there something that we haven't touched on, we haven't asked you about, that you'd like to get off your chest or communicate to the audience?
Yeah, I think we touched that briefly, but I really want to zoom in that and like hear what you think about that as well. Is this project that has been launched by our supporters recently, which I think is a pretty unique blend of the sincere military support, but with a slightly different approach to what people are used to. Because, you know, when we think of supporting the military from civilian perspective, we're thinking of donations first and foremost. And I mean, the Prytula Foundation is doing a great job with that. We have an established charity organization of Azov as well, called Azov One, which is specifically focused on getting super quick feedback on the demands from the front line, having been in direct contact with all the people in the battlefield. But there's another thing which appeared recently, which is called 4308, and I think it's a marvelous story that I think represents really well the overall concept of the Ukrainian civil society's resilience and willingness to help, if not directly by donation or by enlisting to the army, but doing as much as they can where they are right now, in which position. So have you heard of it?
I have not, in fact, no.
Me too.
You haven't either? No?
No.
Okay, so for 4308, let me take a step back. Back in the days, especially in 2022, when Azov was defending Mariupol and has been in very harsh battles with the Russians in Mariupol and at the Azovstal Steel Plant of Mariupol, the Russians not only was firing heavy artillery and gliding bombs on the positions of my fellow brothers, but they were also spending tremendous amount of resources for the smearing campaigns, the internet.
So propaganda campaigns, yeah.
Spreading an immense amount of propaganda narratives, trying to smear, trying to diminish the fighting that we're doing, making up the war crimes that they actually committed and assigned it to us, to Azov. And I must admit, at a certain point, they became pretty successful in this for a short amount of time, mostly because Azov was really busy fighting the enemy and protecting the civilians in Mariupol, so we didn't have the capacity to focus on debunking all that propaganda stuff. So and they got successful to the point where on the Meta platform, on Facebook, on Instagram, you couldn't write a single post just with the word Azov. Whenever it was mentioned, the post was immediately deleted, up to the point that your account, if you were doing this repeatedly, would be getting banned on the platform, which was really a bad thing, actually.
Absolute injustice, yeah.
Yeah, absolute injustice. Yeah, thank you. One of our fighters actually came up with this idea that we still needed to spread the word about our fight. We still needed to spread the word about like all the situation that we're in and about the heroic efforts that our fighters were doing in Azovstal. And so he came up with the idea that we could try to replace it with a code word, but the one which everybody would understand. And the code word was actually 4 digits, so 4308. And if you look closely at that number written down, by just adding a small dash, you can read Azov. So it was a very smart move because it allows us to bypass that kind of blocking and still keep on spreading the words with the address of the commanders from Azovstal Plant to the people, to the nation. And then with like heavy joint efforts, we were able to relieve this ban. So Azov is no longer banned on Meta. That was, as I said, for a pretty short period, but the numbers stayed. And up to the point, it's very cool to have like license plates with those numbers. If you're an Azov, or some guys I know, they have the phone numbers that they bought. They have the 4308 at the end.
It's become a brand.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah.
It has become to a certain extent a brand, like a representation of our brigade. And in 2025, we had so much of demand from civilians that were surrounding us, really smart people who have been helping us a lot, who have been contributing to our battlefield efforts directly or indirectly. And they said, hey, we wanna help you more, and we have an idea. And that idea was to create this brand, exactly as you said, this 4308 brand that could represent Azov in a less military fashion, less militarized fashion, but something that could get our supporters, which I'm proud to say are very numerous, to get them together under a single notion. And it has been working pretty well. So these guys, they opened an offline space for our fighters and our supporters, which is basically a cafe that you can come in, a co-working space, something like that in Kiev and in Lviv.
Kiev, yeah. Where's that? What street's that on?
It's not far from Lukyanivka station. It's like a 10 minutes walk from there. Another one in Lviv, which is very close to the city center as well. They launched a line of merchandise with this branding, very high quality t-shirts, hoodies, and stuff like this, which have extreme popularity not only amongst our active servicemen, but it also is very popular for the civilians. We take our symbolism, our insignia, and all the Azov symbols very seriously. And this is something that we cannot commercialize in any fashion. So we cannot have merch with Azov's insignia, and that was our decision because this is a sacred symbol for us. Yeah. And the shoulder patch is something that you don't get. It's not granted when you join Azov. You need to earn it by what you're doing in the unit, by what you're contributing. And we really take this thing seriously. And this is what we keep specifically for the military, specifically for the fighters. But at the same time, we understood that the civilians who support us, they also want to have some kind of a symbol, some kind of a
show the support,
tag,
be part of the family, yeah.
Exactly, to show that they're part of the family.
Attachments, yeah.
Absolutely, to show their attachment. So that's how the 4308 merchandise line was born. And
I'm gonna have to get something.
Me too.
you absolutely must. Please come visit us here in Kiev or in Lviv. And
right after the show.
Yeah, yes, right away.
Great idea. Like open. Yeah, it was 7 days a week.
Some cup of coffee.
Yeah, and we have really good coffee there as well. Yeah, because it's like a combined space. It's a hub which has a merchandise store, and the merch that we have, it's dedicated to certain units of the brigade, but without this in-your-face direct level of association. So it carries very cool art from the illustrators and artists, Ukrainian ones, who studied the unit's history, and they created this very nice symbols. Well, you absolutely should check it out. Wearing such t-shirts for our supporters, it helps them, exactly as you said, to demonstrate their attachment, and up to the point that I've heard the stories, like people were walking in the street and they see somebody else in the same with a t-shirt with 4308 numbers, and like this
someone
kind of
who
thing.
knows.
So we are part of the same family, and this is great. I think it's very important to have this as an additional glue that stitches the society, which is currently heavily fragmented in Ukraine. And we want to be able to people who share our values to actually be able to show this. And it's been working great. It must be stated, which is the absolute beauty of it, that the 4308 brand works as a social enterprise. So a big share of the profits that it makes, it actually goes on financing the actual brigade's activity on the front line via our charity fund. And I think this is an absolute beauty of a synergy of responsible business with the needs on the front line, and also with the demand from the society. I think it's an absolutely beautiful story, and it has been working really well. We see that a lot of people just coming, even visiting, seeing our hub, which is a beautiful place by itself, and they say, oh wow, well, it kind of mirrors the attitude that we have at what we do on the front line. It mirrors the fact that if you want to do something, you must do it in the best way possible, not just for the sake of doing it, but for the sake of doing the, putting as much effort.
Well, you mentioned
as possible.
professionalism, and that's clearly here as well in this context.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's a high quality merch. It's high quality, like T-shirts and hoodies and stuff, bags and stuff like this. We cannot have this mass market thing. It wouldn't be right. We would better,
of course not.
have it higher quality, have it more complicated in terms of like production. I just know that people who work on this, they also put the same mindset in what they do in that fashion. This has been a great thing, actually, because there is this notion that I think is very valid. One way that I hear now and then is this kind of like shaming of people who don't enlist in the military right now.
Yeah,
But
we have this in society.
yeah, and I'm not sure this is right. I think it's a matter of giving people the opportunity to contribute as much as they are capable of. If you're able to contribute your time, your life to join us and to support us with the maximum efforts possible, this is the highest possible level of appreciation of what you do. But if you still want to support us, if you want to be around, if you want to like spread the word like you guys are doing, if you want to, I don't know, donate the money, if you want to show your appreciation, then it is also valid. It is not comparable, but it is valid and it must be appreciated. And the notion of you're either in the army or for the army, I think is the right notion here.
Those are great points. Yeah,
Totally agree.
So yeah, and then that's why we thought of building this brand up, of helping actually build this brand to the guys who are managing it and covering all the operations, because we're not a business venture, right? We're not an enterprise. We are a brigade on the hottest part of the Ukrainian front line right now, as you can see from even just from plain statistics and numbers, and that's what we want to do. But it's the same thing as I explained, like with the international presence, with all this stuff that I do with the defense industries. This is the same. It's like we want to support something that will contribute to our main goal, to the battlefield efficiency, to saving the lives of our personnel, to fighting more,
and to winning the war.
And to win in the war eventually, absolutely. And if this is, let's say, if inherently it also helps this society to join forces, to give them this kind of like self-identification to a certain extent. Like, who are you walking in a 4308 T-shirt? Well, I'm a supporter of the brigade. I respect the values. I respect the overall values of protecting my country, of contributing my personal time, of sacrificing maybe something for the sake of the common goal.
Anything that unites people around good values is to be encouraged. We are living in a world of fragmentation. We're living in a world where societies are even encouraged to fall apart. We're seeing that, of course, in the U.S., where it's very divisive. This is I believe, one of the strengths that Ukraine can take forward into the future, and why it will be a very, very important part of Europe. It already is now, but will be an increasingly important part, is because of the unity. We can see that as well, that the having Russia as a common enemy of Europe is uniting the rest of Europe at a slower pace, but it's doing it as well, right? And I think that's very positive.
Word.
Yeah, talking about this phrase, either you are in army or for army. How is the process of recruiting now going on in Azov? Because originally, at the very beginning, you were accepting or only people who voluntarily joined the army without those who mobilized on the streets, right? So how does it go on right now? Because you can't get enough people, obviously, to cover all your needs.
I'm not directly involved in the recruitment process, and we have really, really smart guys working on this. Obviously, we need more people. We always need more personnel, because as maybe counterintuitively as it may sound, but the more people you have, the more protected each of personnel of your units are, because it allows for a faster rotation from the frontline positions. It allows for better supply of the materials that you need, more efficiency in faster repairs of the damaged vehicles and everything like this. Azov was initially founded by the volunteers, by the people who decided for themselves. Nobody told them to join, right? They just said, I feel this is something that I must be doing. And this helped build the culture within the unit. And we want to maintain that culture as much as possible. And we want to make sure that, a person fighting alongside you is a person who has similar values and similar motivations that you have.
You have been on panels with quantum system and NATO-linked events. You have also organizer of defense-related conferences in Kyiv. So when you are sitting across of NATO or Western military investors or stakeholders, what they are usually gets wrong about military needs in Ukraine right now?
I think what I was the most fascinated about these kind of discussions is that it's not they got something wrong. It's rather that most of the time they're very open to listening. What I'm fascinated in a bad way, that it's been 4 years of the full-scale invasion of Russia in Ukraine, and still some things which were completely obvious to us in 2022, they're still considered news for some people. And this is probably also the matter of, us not doing our job well in communicating this, but also it's a matter of, listening on the other side, on our counterpart as well. From the practical perspective, I think this is great that I see there is so much of place for this knowledge to come in. And there is also reasonably high amount of interest in actually filling those gaps with the knowledge that Ukraine can deliver. And this is really great. This is really good. What I cannot approve, the story, is, the especially like private sector interest is, it feels a little bit like the dot-coms bubble in terms that there is not huge, but noticeable share of people who are like, oh, there's a lot of money in defense right now. Everybody's, there's a lot of capital. There's a lot of financing. Let's make a nice pitch. Let's cover it up with saying we want to support Ukraine, which in practical doesn't have any, verification. And let's jump on the bandwagon.
So like what we would call defense tourism.
Yeah, it is tourism. It is a certain level of incompetence that is also being brought there, which is, we had this in the background, the discussion of the AI hallucinations. I had a person reaching out to me saying, hey, so would it be a valid list of the Ukrainian drone producers that I got, like top 5? And like I know 3 names out of 5, 2 I never heard of. Doesn't mean they don't exist or whatever. But most importantly, it misses those who I'm pretty sure are the big players that need to be there. And I was like, how did you get that list? And they're like, well, I asked ChatGPT. I was like, awesome. And what's the purpose of this doing? Maybe you should do more research. You should run some interviews. You should address maybe Brave One, for example, to get some more statistics for whatever reason you're looking for that. And I said, I don't have time for that. I got my pitch tomorrow. And I was like, what? Seriously? So you made a superficial research from untrusted sources and you have a pitch? I didn't even bother to ask what that pitch is gonna be about, but it got me extremely angry because it shows this level of unprofessionalism of this, I don't know, chasing the money, chasing
Is it like a golden rush?
In a way, in a way it is. And this is something which I think is absolutely unacceptable because if you talk about this kind of approach in whatever, like internet services or commercial services, whatever it is, right? That's fine. Nobody's gonna die because of this. In this case, somebody could actually practically die because
That's
of this.
the point, yes.
And this is what this harshness of the situation, this potential impact, the fact that the investor funds, or even worse, the direct like financial aid that would be coming to Ukraine from foreign countries could be potentially impacted by such clowns, pardon my French, it will directly impact our capabilities on the battlefield and the lives of the people that fight there. And this is so blatantly cynical or stupid. I don't even know what is worse, being stupid or being cynical, to be honest.
In any case, probably they will not eventually get to the front line, because if you For example, as a military
in the way,
technology
yeah.
scouts officer will not approve them, they will not get to the soldiers, right?
No, they won't, but eventually certain amount of budgets would be allocated to that vaporware that they might be creating or selling, or the half-ass services, unprofessional services that they would be providing, which would remove that money from something more important that could make an impact.
And also just essentially wasting time from the military's perspective, and perhaps even getting to a testing stage or anything like that, where it wasn't, it's simply not the right thing. And I mean, the value of human life is such that it should be reflected in the value of the effort that is applied.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And when you go in the defense industry one way or another, you need to understand this is not just practical capital investment. This is not about a startup that gets some seed funding and then spins off and then makes a unicorn. This is human lives at stake, as dramatic as it would sound, but it's true. And it needs, proper attitude to it.
Respect.
It's fine. Yeah, exactly. It is fine to make money on defense for such companies. This is how capitalism works. And capitalism is driving the innovation right now. Capitalism is driving our battlefield capabilities in the end. So I don't have a problem with that. But the consciousness of that approach is, I think, what is sometimes lacking from some conversations that I'm having. And like one of the reasons again that I'm doing what I'm doing right now, putting that link, bringing that adequate approach, I would say, putting this relevance, like spreading the word about the practical and pragmatic things out there, is something that I also do to try and counter that kind of a behavior, because we will benefit on a battlefield from it in a longer term.
So I imagine that these days you probably react a little more stringently to people who are coming with something where it's not fully thought through.
No. You see, it's fine to have good intentions. It's fine to try and help. It's fine to have an idea which will never work in the end. This is how innovation works, right? It's one out of, I don't know, let's say 100, right, projects that actually produces something that is actually really, good and practical. And it's not that you need to filter out the rest. No, you need to talk with everybody, because some guys might have a inherently failing idea, but with the feedback, with the information, they can think, okay, maybe we can pivot. Maybe we wanted to create this thing and we'd rather create that thing that we never thought about, and maybe that thing will work. You never know. That's why I spend noticeable amount of my time talking to student teams, startups, anybody who can reach out to me whenever I have like a time slot for have a short call with them, because that's so many conversations that I had already when I explain, again, pretty basic things, pretty common knowledge things. Again, no secrets or anything revealed. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's how it works. Oh, wow. So you just saved us several months of R&D into stuff that would never fly, because here is an absolute, and it's not me telling them about the blocker, it's them saying, okay, we see a huge blocker here for this. We should probably come back to the drawing board and try to make something different. And it's also important for these conversations to happen more and more often, for more units to get involved into these discussions, not just steering capital, validating the technology, running the testing, trying something, providing feedback, but also this like early stage validation also needs to happen. But if people that are behind the solution or product they're building, they need to understand that they must be very, very receptive to any feedback, because negative feedback is also important feedback for them. I sometimes stumble upon a certain level of arrogance, I would say, not really earned arrogance, not because they've done already and now they can be arrogant, but rather an arrogance of, I know better. When some manufacturer from a commercial company says to me, I know better, that they know better what kind of equipment we need on the front line, I give a call to the actual operators of that equipment and say, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah,
well,
what do you
think about that? And they're like, are they stupid or what? This kind of stuff. So, and that's why this building bridges, real, practical, pragmatic bridges between our needs and the defense industry and the private sector is so important.
Yeah.
It's a multitude of factors. Like I've been in this for only half a year, specifically working on the Miltech partnerships and then searching for the technologies. And I've already seen so much of it, so many angles where such activity could be actually helpful and useful for everybody, for all the stakeholders involved in that process.
For this half a year of Miltech scouting, how many of startups or companies really get your feedback, provide development, produce something, and get you a product that you are needed?
To the point of getting us the product that we needed, not many. Way too few.
Sad.
I would say. It is. But again, you need to understand, if we're talking startup, if we're talking TRL 4-ish, it's not going to be ready quickly, especially if we're talking a foreign company that tries to tap. And again, we're trying to help as much as possible with them tapping into our expertise, but then they get back to their like engineering room or whatever, and they start building stuff, trying stuff, searching for the funds to finance it and so on.
And 6 months is not a long time outside of Ukraine.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Exactly.
Pardon my Ukrainian timeline. Like 3 months is
Slow it down,
too slow.
partner, slow
Yes,
down.
we have the Shahid. We have new version of Shahids. You are outdated already.
That is true. But on the other hand, what the Western company have, what I think we lack right now, and that we need to focus on that area as well, is they have this industrial base. They have the scientific legacy in terms of innovation and technology that Ukraine, unfortunately, is right now only rebuilding from ashes its capabilities.
Yeah.
And like I've been to it, like to a big technical university in Germany, and like, I mean, gosh, if we had such a facility here, how much we could have accelerated. But this won't appear like that in a second. This is the capabilities that you need to consistently, constantly build, invest in, and the universities that then create really cool products and really like real science take hundreds of years. And I'm not even much exaggerating. Well, at least dozens of years, you know, of constant investment and constant just pouring money into that pit until it appears, you know, or it slowly starts appearing. There is a huge area that could open up new opportunities for both Ukraine and the Western countries, the allied countries, because this is actually the place where we can match our adaptability and our quick reaction to changes with the industrial capacity and scientific capacity that is available out there. You can see it from the multiple joint ventures that are being right now established, especially in the last month with Ukrainian companies,
The Ukraine
GV,
program, yeah.
Exactly. And it's not just, not just building for Ukraine, right? It is also about the non-Ukrainian companies tapping into how we do our processes, how we design things, how we react to feedback. It's their way of learning by doing, and we need to be supporting this process as much as possible. I really want Ukraine to become not just the exporter of military equipment, which is something that we definitely need to do, but I really see the future where Ukraine becomes the countrywide think and do tank, as I learned recently, a new term, for defense in the widest concept possible, if you know what I mean.
So like the automotive industry of Germany,
Exactly.
this would be the defense industry of Ukraine.
Exactly.
We have a guest coming on the show in approximately a month's time who is from Western side, but an expert in advanced manufacturing. He's here in Kiev at the moment, and he looks at the Ukrainian companies and says, well, we need to share some lessons from outside of how to create a truly powerful industrial manufacturing company. What are the processes and all of these sorts of things? So we're looking forward to bringing him on the show.
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of the expertise that I think Ukrainian manufacturers need to be open to absorbing and open for the meaningful partnerships and collaboration. I'm kind of afraid that we might eventually end up being this just source of resources, if you know what I mean, but that we won't be able to build these capabilities, this end-to-end capabilities.
Yeah, and this is
on a
also a lot about
systemic fashion.
IP. Where is the IP? What things are shared? And that was touched on a bit at Invest in Bravery last night, actually. How do we make sure that Ukraine keeps this edge that it's creating and becomes a powerhouse in Europe for the good of all?
We have so many companies in Ukraine that are producing weapons for army, and they don't care about their IP, and establishment, NATO contracts, etc., because they are deeply focused on the production itself. R&D, production, scaling, R&D, production, scaling, reacting to the needs of the army and producing new interceptors, for example. As Dmitro, CEO of Taras, mentioned, that they don't look for investments. They don't need investments right now. They are self-funded, and they don't want anyone to stop them or to refocus them from building product, and to do this P&L sheets, etc., etc. So it looks like many successful companies that you would probably like to invest because they are growing very rapidly are deeply focused on building something either, but not to search for investments or for cooperation with someone.
Yeah, so we need to help give them a heads up on the future. What sorts of things should they be protecting now and thinking about for? I mean, the world is full of labs where some brilliant scientist is sitting just doing a relatively mundane job, and yet that person was the one who made millions for someone else, right?
Yes.
And that should not happen for Ukraine.
No, absolutely
Not with the
not.
sacrifices that have also been made here.
Well, this is the thing. This is the thing here, and then a very important angle also to that. What you explained that CEO said, it makes total sense on the tactical level, because that's the tactical problems that we need to solve right now. It's very similar to the situation that we have on the battlefield. We need to fight on the battlefields right now. We need to repel the enemy right now, right? The assaults that are coming to us on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. We still need to be able to dedicate certain capacity to think forward. Yeah, and that's what we have been doing. But it's not easy. It's not easy when you have this immediate threat that you need to respond to. And for the defense industry, I would imagine there might be a similar situation in terms of they need to cover the needs, they need to fulfill the requests that they have right now. Do they have a capacity to think a little bit ahead? They should have. They might need some help with doing this.
They need some help with that, I think, yeah.
Yeah, but it's about the mindset. They need to have the mindset to think about not securing it right now, but rather being more future-proof as an organization and with their equipment as well.
Yeah.
And actually, you touched the IP aspect of it. I'm not really a legal expert, but maybe you guys have a better understanding about that.
Also not a lawyer here.
No, but the thing is, the pace of innovation, the pace of the new products development in Ukraine, as requested as the battlefield needs, it kind of contradicts with the standard IP process. In terms of you invest money that's what I heard from some people who are experts in that thing, at least in the IP, that, well, okay, you make a device and a drone, whatever. You register the IP for it. And even before your patent application or like a model design application was fully processed and accepted, you already need to change the construction aspect.
Or you changed it already.
Or you did change it already, exactly. And it complicates things. I'm not sure if there is if it's possible for the legislation to somehow follow up on that, or maybe that is fine. Maybe we need to stay in this non-registered IP zone until it gets to a certain pinnacle of the design that you'd be able to say, okay, this is the final-ish configuration of what I have, and that's something that I want to register, and then I'm going to just gradually improve it. But when the steepest part of this R&D evolution is done and you go on a plateau, that's the area. But again,
those challenges are also related to NATO procurement, where you say, okay, what is the codified, which version of the product are we talking about, and how do we then account for, and there are ways of doing it, but they need to be addressed. How do we then account for product incremental changes that are necessary for the battlefield, right? When in fact you've sort of been locked in the old, so you've been locked more into this was the original, this is the approved version, right?
unconventional as it might seem, but actually there is a similar problem in Ukraine as well for the Ukrainian manufacturers.
For sure.
Because we, I had the conversation with our UGV operators, and they were like, we had this drone supplied by whatever means to us, and it's a decent one. It works, needs some modifications as usual, but it's okay. But its batteries are basically fixed in there, and to replace the batteries, you need to remove the top of the whole system with the cage that holds the cargo, and only then you can reach out to the batteries. And they were like, and we told the manufacturer, is there anything that doesn't allow them to make the batteries hot swappable, to have some kind of a lever that you push and you just pull it out, and then you pull it back, because unloading a 200 kilos cargo drone, which weighs by itself 200 kilos plus, that is kind of a task, especially in the battle zone, especially in operational. They're like, well, yeah, but if we make this kind of access for the hot swaps, we will need to recodify as a next generation, and which means it's not going to be, we're going to have a pause in the procurement, and we have already on back order a multitude of these devices that we need to ship, and we need to focus on the manufacturing. So there's, again, this
such a difficult
balance.
thing to navigate. It really is.
Yeah, I heard that some companies trying to overcome this problem, and for example, it's extremely difficult to codify a rocket, a missile in Ukraine. So instead of that, Firepoint, companies that produce long-range missiles, codify it like a drone, and now they are striking rocket drones on Russia, and it saved them a huge, enormous amount of time and bureaucracy. So
something else.
Yeah. Sometimes you just find a silly solution in this system.
No, right. It's also a problem with the new categories that spin out. You got a drone, a loitering ammunition, a missile, a rocket, and what?
Gliding bomb.
Gliding bomb, exactly. And how to tell those apart. Maybe it's good that it's not that regulated, because it leaves a little bit more of space for.
It's an interesting
for
question.
innovation.
Where is the balance? Because obviously the governmental procurement can't happen with the contracts for millions of hryvnias if you are not sure that this product is solid.
Yeah. Let's allocate 100 million hryvnias to buy a thing. That's probably not going to happen.
Trust us.
So obviously
a difficult thing.
It will stay the same. Thanks, Mykyta. That was really
thanks.
interesting to hear your personal life, your professional career in Azov, your current situation. That's quite unique. I never heard before. Military technology scout. I never heard about this position.
I made it up myself.
It was very smart of you. It was very smart, and I hope it really paid off in a long term.
It must do.
Yeah.
It must do.
The technology has take some time for development, but probably eventually it will empower the front line.
Mykyta, thanks so much for being on the show. You've shared a lot with us. I would like to, even today, invite you back to give us a bit more of your personal story. What happened for you from 2014, and the efforts I know you've made in your personal life to support the war effort and your brothers in arms.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure for me as well. It's been a great conversation, and I extremely appreciate what you guys are doing here with helping spread the word of the Ukrainian military, of the Ukrainian context outside of Ukraine. I think this is very important, and I really appreciate having this opportunity to speak here. I will be glad to join you again if you want to have me.
Thanks so much.
For sure.